You're listening to this week's episode of the Vacation Rental Business in Today's World podcast. You're about to start transforming your business and life with the information found here. We interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in the vacation short-term rental industry and supporting businesses. The information found here is a combination of brain science, transformational thinking, safety and loss prevention, and vacation short-term rental knowledge and experiences, all rolled into one to help you and your business to achieve levels you never thought possible. I am glad you are here, and now please welcome your host, Eric Thibodeau.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Safer VRs. I'm Eric Thibodeau, and I'm glad you're here. So as we continue this week, we're going to cover the fourth principle in human operating principles or human performance for when we take a look at it in a safety perspective, or actually any perspective. But this week, I'm actually back home. It's good to be home. I've been traveling the last 3 weeks. Definitely good to be home and resting a little bit, taking care of some stuff here, and still interacting with my businesses, Safer VRs and Current Tides. And we have a new business we launched here. We purchased a franchise, so we're going to be doing insulation, particularly spray foam insulation. So excited about that too. But as we get into this human performance here, and we're going to cover principle number 4. And principle number 4 is context drives behavior. Context drives behavior. So I'll start off with a story to give an illustration about this. First, I'm an engineer, and I don't mind going to the store. However, when I go to the store, I like to be efficient. I like to have a list, or I like to have a route. And I went to the store. I think I was getting some milk, and I was walking in there, and I walked in the store. I think it was Kroger, and thinking, okay, I'm heading to the milk, but the milk is probably the furthest point from the entrance in the store. It's all the way to the back and to the right. And I was thinking, why? Because a lot of people go into the store for milk or bread or eggs or juice, some of these things, maybe these high volume type selling things. Why are they way in the back of the store? And I went to the milk, came back, and along the way, they have like Easter candy, right? So I got some Easter candy. I didn't get a basket or anything, I was going for a gallon of milk. I get some Easter candy, and I go along, and they got chips for sale. So I grabbed some of that. And then I'm in the checkout line, and I said, well, I don't have any more gum. Anyway, so I get there, and I check out, and I have like 2 bags of stuff when I went into the store for a gallon of milk. And I was thinking, gosh. And then I started reading and thinking about this topic and just how applicable those two are, right? So whether we're Kroger or we're Current Tides or we're XYZ property management company, how our context of what we have in our organization drives the behavior of our team, of our owners and our guests. And just like I went out to the store, and the reason the milk is in the back is they want you to pass by all these other items that you may or may not need so that you can purchase them, right? I went in for milk. That's like the content. But here's all these things that are surrounding me, like Easter egg candy and chips. And yeah, I could probably walk by, but that's part of what they're doing, right? And Easter egg candy. Easter candy comes out like once a year, right? So you got to get it. And they know that, and they post it right in that route. And they're doing that intentionally so that I will purchase that, you will purchase that. And so they're having this subconscious effect on us, and maybe we don't recognize it. Maybe we do. That's great. But now, since we're all human beings and we work in organizations made by human beings, we create context in our businesses, or maybe we don't create context in our businesses. Employees and guests and owners create their own context. So when something happens in our properties or in our business, we need to examine that whole area of context. what is the context that's driving the team's behavior? We take the same thing, we apply the story here with housekeeping. I have a housekeeper going to a property. They get there and, heck, it's spring break right now. So maybe we should be figuring that, hey, we need to make sure we're doing a little bit more review, allowing a little bit more time. But our processes are designed to be efficient. Like I'm talking about going to the store, getting a gallon of milk, walking out. Housekeeper walks into the property here during spring break, and the place is a disaster. And the context of what we designed was for a person to go and make a quick clean at that property, like maybe we would have in other times of the year. It's not happening. And so now either you have a process that asks the housekeeper to make some calls, ask for some help. Of course, maybe they're thinking inside, you know what, I can do this myself. It sure is a mess. And then 3 hours later, they're not halfway through and now they're calling for help and saying, I really need some help. This property is a mess. And so that context in the organization, how is that set up? It could be set up where, hey, you don't really call for help if you don't need it. Or, hey, let's be open and talk about this. When you get to a property, housekeepers, and it's in really bad shape, call the supervisor, call your team leader and say, is there anybody else who can route me here? These people, these guests, they just left the place in a huge mess, and I don't think I'll do it in the 4-hour time limit that we got here. So what context is in the organization? We as leaders set that context, right? And that context, whether it's present or not present, is driving the behavior of our teams. So context drives behavior is really important. And if I can take that down, I could fill in the blank with how we run safety or how we don't run safety, or when there's an event and we take a look at it. And really what we want to be taking a look at is how is that context that's in there, right? Context is the driving force for behavior. I'll say that a few times, and it's one of these things that are just really important. And in our organizations, we are context creating machines. We do that. We want to set up processes, or maybe we don't set up processes. It just runs the gamut about what's happening. And so when an event occurs, whether it's housekeeping or you're going to the grocery store or you have a safety event or something else, it gets back to the principle number 2 and number 1, blame fixes nothing, right? And people make mistakes, number 1. So why are people making mistakes? We just talked about learning and improving is vital. Now we're going to dig into how we do that more, because we need to really look at the context of what an employee or a guest or an owner is facing when an event occurs. So now we can apply it to everything. I'm just going to look now at safety and just talk a little bit about that. Nothing occurs in your organization that is not influenced by the context generated within your organization. So if we say, hey, I really need to make sure we are checking the property and doing a good review. The property has a pool, it's getting to be springtime. We have hot tubs. We really want to make sure that all the safety precautions, all the controls around pools are in place. So now we've set that particular context. Or what if we didn't set that context, right? And we're March going into April or whenever you're hearing this, and you haven't set the context. We've transitioned seasons. Maybe you haven't transitioned season in your particular part of the country. However, the context about the pools needs to be set. It needs to be reinforced, and the controls need to be verified that they're working and in place. So just in this example that I gave you, we could see where setting context around pools, safety, and the controls, and one where we didn't do it, we could have 2 different outcomes. We could have the same outcome, right? It could be nothing. It could be something. However, when it is something and an event occurs, we stop and look at the context and how we set the context in our organization. So context has a very significant influence over the behaviors we see in our organizations with our teams and with our owners And context is not really an accident. Context is a purposeful part of how we run our organizations, how we do essential work, and how we do safe work, safe controls in our businesses. I'm not going to stop here. I'm just going to pause a little bit and give like a little bit of a review. So we talked about context drives behavior. And when we typically look at a behavior, a traditional model that's been used to describe a behavior and what happens before it and what happens after it. So we have, it's called the ABC model. So B is the behavior. I have a behavior, and every behavior is prompted by an antecedent. An antecedent is, it could be a thought, it could be I read a sign, it could be something that precedes the behavior. Is it telling me to stop? Like a stop sign is an antecedent, right? If I don't stop at the stop sign, I have a behavior said, stop at the stop sign prompts that, I stop. If I don't stop, I have consequences. If I do stop, I still have consequences, right? If I stop based upon the antecedent said, stop at the stop sign, consequences are typically no issue. However, if I'm approaching a stop sign and I see the sign and I know it means that's an antecedent warning me to, hey, go ahead and stop right here because there's an intersection. If I don't do that, maybe the brakes go out on my vehicle or I have some other issue, there's consequences, right? Consequences could be I could strike another vehicle could strike me, I could strike a person. So all of these consequences now can occur. So if we take a look at that, and historically, we say, I don't stop at the stop. I stop at the stop sign because I don't want to hit someone. I don't want to have a vehicle accident. I don't want to create a problem, right? So that means that consequences are now driving my behavior, and the antecedent is just out there like, meh, it's okay. And so what that is, it's sort of, there's truth to it, right? We do things or we don't do things based upon consequences. However, can I offer that's a backward working model? I don't want to have something, so I'm going to choose the behavior that doesn't cause the consequence. What if I stop at the stop sign and I still have an accident because someone else hits me coming across? So if we back up, and now evidence is starting to show, and it's why it's applicable to this conversation, is that the antecedent, what is prompting you, the prompt that's there, the conditions that are there. How about if we call it the context? The context of the situation is now saying, I need to perform a behavior to stop at the stop sign in this particular example, because the consequences may or may not cause me adverse reactions to myself or others, to our business, etc. Am I doing that now because I'm prompted by context? And is context a stronger driver for what's happening? I will say that the context about why the behavior does or doesn't occur is more powerful. And when you start to look at events that occur, whether you have controls in place or no controls in place or controls that failed, the context about that is more important than the consequences. Because the context, I can set the context about the behaviors that we want to occur. And then more than likely, we will have the consequences that we want, which could be a clean property, a vehicle that stops safely at the right mark, and we just fill in the blank for the rest. But there's definitely material now saying, hey, this context, this antecedent is really what's driving us forward. And we're doing it in a proactive way. We're not letting something negative happen or the presence of something we can't measure not happening. However, I could always set the context of what's happening. I could always talk to my team about safe driving and the context around that. I can always talk to my team about what are our processes and procedures when we come to housekeeping. I can always set my process and procedures of what controls we want in place before I get to the property as part of our training, as part of our principles, if you will. And then the consequences will be what they will be. And hopefully they will be in a place where if there is a failure, I'm failing to a safe state. You see how everything ties back to that, everyone? We cannot prevent every incident. However, we can set context, and we know people will make mistakes, and we're not going to blame them because we're going to learn in that situation. And how we learn and improve is vital. We're going to look at the context of that situation. Every incident, every event has what we did before, what we did in the now, and what happens afterwards. We can't do anything in the after. The context, the antecedent, helps us prepare for what we want our team, our guests, and our owners to do. That's so important. I have somewhere in the property, I have the physical address of the property that's there, and I let the guests know that. That's an antecedent that's now coming in and saying, if there's an emergency, Mr. and Mrs. Guest, and you call 911, here's the address. Here's the address where you are. We know you're enjoying this great vacation, and maybe you forgot in the heat of the moment, you didn't know you were at 123 Main Street, but here it is, so that we can hopefully not need it, but when you do, I've set the context for the behavior to call 911 with the right address to either reduce the impact or eliminate the impact of what's happening in the consequences. So powerful. I know I spent a lot of time there. We often believe, and I was too until the last few years, right? That consequences drive our behaviors, and they do. However, antecedents, context is way more powerful. So I'll just keep going here. So this human performance, context drives behavior. This should not really be a controversial principle or topic, right? Science has shown that systems are important to behavioral outcomes. A system on how we do housekeeping, a system on how we look at the controls and apply the controls for a pool. I can fill in the blank with anything, but science has shown that systems are important to behavioral outcomes. And what drives behavioral outcomes? We just talked about context, this information. So maybe this, in the safety world, I think this could be maybe a little more touchy, because there's definitely, through the years, just like in things within the vacation rental industry, we've always learned that behaviors drive consequence. And now the science is turning around a little bit more and saying, hey, the antecedent, the context that you set is what's driving the behavior. And this stems from workers either choose to do work correctly or not. The context of what's in there is what drives people, our workers, our guests, to choose what they're doing. So when we continue here, we believe that whether I say workers or guests or owners choose to be safe, or maybe worse yet, choose not to be safe, right? And that just runs counter to fundamental system theory and design. We don't make that choice, right? Science shows that workers' choice is absolutely influenced by the context in which the choice is made. So later, there's a story. Well, I won't go into the story, sorry. But everything that happens in every event, there's context. And in the context, we make choices as people. And if in the absence of having the right context set for your organization, individuals, whether guests or owners or your employees, or even you as the owner in the business, you will choose based upon your thoughts and feelings at the particular time. Systems can and do influence our workers, our guests, our owners, usually resulting in positive and also the effective outcomes that we desire, right? With all the controls in place, I can prevent a pool incident, event, or fatality or drowning. With all the controls in place and a fire occurs, I can safely evacuate people, assuming they can walk out the house or move out the house. I can alert them. I have fire extinguishers. I have address for 911. I have clear routes of egress because I have a system that we set the context to allow this process to occur so we can create these safe outcomes. Basically, we're saying this fourth principle supports the idea that if you create a behavioral context, you will produce positive outcomes because context drives behavior. That's it in a nutshell right there. If I have a system that creates the behavioral context I want my owners to follow, my guests to follow, my team to follow in our business, I will produce positive outcomes. And positive outcomes are what we seek. Now, not every positive outcome is perhaps nothing happens, right? Maybe something does happen. I have a vehicle accident. Instead of having two maintenance team workers seriously injured or killed, the vehicle's damaged and they can walk away. That's a positive outcome because we could look at maybe not having that context, not having those systems to make sure our vehicles are properly maintained. We chose the right vehicle. Employees are wearing seatbelts. They're not talking on the phone. Fill in all the controls you want, and we want a safe outcome. So here we have it. Context drives behavior. So when we're looking at setting this context that'll drive the behavior, here's what's really important. Maybe you figured it out. I'm just going to bring it out. Is that we can do this beforehand. We are doing this beforehand. We're not waiting for an incident to occur or an event to occur, and we wait for the consequences and said, you know what? We should have bought better vehicles. We should have had a seatbelt policy. I could fill in the blank with all the different things. I'm doing this up front. You're doing this up front because we understand the context is going to drive it, right? And what we're looking at is to shift our thinking from what failed or who failed to context, not the person. Who sets the context? I'm the leader of my organization. I set the context. I established a system. So there's not, I'm blaming a person. I'm looking at the process that I created, that you created, and why, what worked. Don't ask why. What worked, and how are we going to learn? What do we learn? What's the context in this situation? Not that, the driver messed up. The person didn't do a job cleaning the house. They didn't really check the fire extinguishers. No. What worked? And what's the context that's driving the behavior in this particular situation, this event? As leaders, we set this, and it's critically important that we take a look at that. So as we begin to wrap up, when we're looking now at the context and we have an event, and remember our employees, our team members, the people in the front line, the guests, the owners, remember that sharp pointed stick we talked about? These are the individuals we need to speak with and say, tell us what worked. Or before an event happens, say, here's the process we're looking at doing. Here's our thinking on this situation. Will this work? Ask them the question. They have the answers. They will tell you if you ask them. Don't think or believe that, hey, I'm the manager. I know what's right and wrong. Great. How's that been working for you? Maybe it's working great. However, is it going to get you to where you really want to go? Your team knows the answers. They understand the context of what's working and not working, and it'll help you. They will help you set the right context as you go forward. So now as we wrap up here, we understand that context drives behavior, and it's going to help you manage success, failure in your organization. And understanding and controlling this context here in which your workers or your guests or your owners do activities is really what you want to understand. Good systems have the ability to help you manage uncertain operational outcomes you will always have, right? Not when you have them, you will always have them, when they happen, you will be prepared for them. You will have the context. You will talk to your workers. They will help you build the controls you need to prevent something from occurring. Or when something does occur, you fail to a state that allows people to walk away. And it fails that no one dies. Okay? That's really important. It's all up to us. Manage the context that you have on purpose And most importantly, what am I going to say? Context drives behavior. And we as managers in our property management business or owners set the context for our owners, our guests, and our team. So I hope you found this valuable. It's getting really powerful here. And this whole 5-part series, which we're wrapping up number 4, everything is within your grasp. Maybe you need help to get it. Maybe it takes time to get it. Safer VRs is here to support you with that and understand that there is more taking place than just the failures, the checks we do. This is a whole process about how we protect our team, our guests, and our owners. And I'm happy to bring this to you. I want you to find and hope you're finding value in this. Next week, we'll do number 5, the 5th principle. But if you have any questions, reach out to me on safervrs.com and eric@safervrs.com. Hit me up in LinkedIn. I'd be glad to help you, continue to support you in your journey and quest, because context drives behavior. All right, everybody, go out and create a safe day. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Safer VR's podcast with Eric Thibodeau. If you enjoy this, I would love you to join my Facebook group, The Safer Vacation Rentals, for more of the same. You can also join our email list at www.safervrs.com.